Good to see you both.
Nice to see you.
Senator Dodd, should the United States set a firm deadline for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq?
I believe we should, Tim. I didn't come to that decision a long time ago. It's been an evolving situation here. It seems to me if you use the template of national security, how secure are we today? This is something all of us have to be concerned about. What's happening to us? I think most would agree today that we're more isolated today. Our moral standing in the world has suffered terribly, in my view, over the last number of years as a result of our involvement in Iraq. We're feeling, I think, less secure, more vulnerable today. What's happened to our military as well. You hear this not just from people in public life, but retired generals and others talking about the condition of our National Guard, the condition of our combat readiness of our troops. It seems to me here that the Iraqis really do have to assume this responsibility. I thought it was terribly reflective of what's going on in Iraq when you had the parliament actually considering taking a 2 or 3 month vacation this year from their duties at a time when young men, American women, are putting their lives on the line. Well, my view is there's a greater likelihood, I think a greater likelihood, that the Iraqis, if they understand that this is not an open-ended process here, there's a beginning time and an end time for our military involvement here, and that we're willing over this next year to do what we can to help on border security, to help on counterterrorism, to help train troops, but that come March, the end of March, the 1st of April next year, our military participation is over with. Now let me quickly add, that's not enough of this debate. Why are we using statecraft? What's happened to the utilization of other tools available to us? Our economic, our political, our diplomatic resources, which are significant in this country and have almost been neglected during this entire process, in my view. So my view is, without the clarity here, the boldness of this, the directness of this, I deeply worry by the hour that our security is going to be greater and greater in jeopardy as a result of this policy of refusing to set that time frame.
Speaker.
Well, I think you have to approach it from 2 different levels. I disagree deeply with Senator Dodd on 2 different levels. First of all, at the immediate human level this morning, there are young men and women risking their lives in uniform who I think are dramatically going to be demoralized by the idea of who's the last person to die trying to win in Iraq. I mean, if we have to set a deadline, let's set it for next Tuesday. Let's get out of there. Because I think the idea that we're going to set a magic moment a year from now or 11 months from now or 10 months from now basically says we are prepared to accept defeat if the deadline's real and we can't find a way to get to victory, then we will accept defeat. We will have legislated defeat. So first of all, at the level of our young men and women in uniform, I think it's very demoralizing. And Senator Levin, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Democrat from Michigan, said something very similar in voting against a firm deadline. But there's a bigger part. And here I actually partially agree with Senator Dodd. I am not comfortable either with the current situation in Iraq, and you've heard me on this show as early as December of 2003 talk about major mistakes, nor am I comfortable around the world with our extraordinarily limited use of statecraft. And I think that point you're making is right. The North Koreans are cheating on their agreement now for over 30 days about nuclear weapons. We still, after 5.5 years, do not have control of Waziristan in northwest Pakistan, and it is both the place bin Laden's probably hiding and it is the place the Taliban uses to attack Afghanistan. We have been told by the UN in the last few days that the Iranians are now producing at least 1,300 centrifuges producing nuclear material, and that they almost certainly will have a nuclear weapon within a year. We see in Israel that Hamas rockets being fired from Gaza have led the Israelis to actually abandon a town. I mean, nobody's covered this very much, but an entire town has been abandoned now because it's indefensible under the current rules of engagement. The British just sentenced to life in prison without parole 5 terrorists. And in New Jersey 2 weeks ago, we arrested 6 terrorists, 3 of whom had been in this country illegally for 6 years, and had had 75 encounters with the police without anybody noticing they were illegal. If you take this worldwide pattern, and lastly, Estonia has been under assault probably by the Russians in cyber warfare for 3 weeks now. As a member of NATO and as part of the European Union, I mean, you look around the world, the forces of freedom are on retreat. The forces that are anti-freedom, pro-dictatorship, and in some cases purely evil, are on offense. I agree with Senator Dodd that we need a dramatically expanded ability to use statecraft, but I think you've got to make any Iraq decision within the framework of this larger maelstrom of dangers that are growing across the planet.
Senator Dodd, if you withdrew American troops by a date certain, what happened if total chaos erupted, total civil war erupted, bloodshed, ethnic cleansing? What would you do?
Well, I don't think you have to ask the question hypothetically. That's what's going on today. 60,000 Iraqis have lost their lives over the last 4 years. 2 million have left the country. 1 million more displaced within the country. I don't know what the paper said this morning, but how many more lost their lives yesterday? I'm talking about Iraqis in this particular case. So it seems to me the issue of chaos, it's already upon us here. You're looking at a conflict. We always talk about the conflict in the Middle East being an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We fail to understand there's been significant conflict within the Muslim world for years, going back to 1632, in fact, when you trace the history of the conflict between the Shias and Sunni populations. We're in the middle of a civil war. This is the point where I think Newt and I really probably part ways on this, talking about winning or losing in Iraq. This is a civil war in the country. It is a civil war. We're in the middle of a civil war. This is not the United States versus some sole enemy in the place there. Yes, there are elements of al-Qaeda there, I know that, but the conflict is fundamentally one between Shias and Sunnis. Kurds are involved as well, but principally Shias and Sunnis. No one has ever suggested, none of our top military people have ever suggested from day one that there was a military solution to this. In fact, major military leaders have been highly critical of the Bush administration for embracing this notion that there was somehow going to be a military victory here. I don't believe that. I don't think most people do. There's a political diplomatic solution to this if we give it some space and an opportunity to succeed. I can't guarantee it, Tim, that if we adopt what I'm suggesting, and that is leaving within a year, militarily leaving within the year, that there won't be problems that come afterwards. This much I do know. The status quo is doing great damage to that country and great damage to the United States. The moral authority has been shot on this thing terribly. What Newt just said is absolutely correct. These other issues we've got to focus our attention on. Our military people tell us today, Lord forbid, that we were faced with a major military challenge tonight. All of us agreed that the only legitimate response was a military one. We'd be hard-pressed to respond to it. That's public testimony of our senior military people in this country. That's very, very dangerous. And this notion that we're so wedded to be engaged in this civil conflict in Iraq is doing us great damage. That's why I'm advocating this time certain.
But notice, there are two things here.